But I'll tell you what is not up for debate, Dominic.
What would that be?
And that is that Israel Adesanya perhaps had a all-time moment last night.
I'd
Uh,
say, yeah.
that might be the best way I can kind of summarize it. Essentially, he gets the second round knockout of the sitting champion Alex Pereira, reclaims his middleweight title, adds a one on the scoreboard. Although, what was his little saying? He said, I don't keep scores, I settle them."
Yeah,
So
yeah.
don't matter to him. But he finally gets a win over his boogeyman, Alex Pereira. Um, Comes about, I want to say, like 4 minutes, 33 seconds of round number two. And Dominic this fight was great, by the way.
It
The
was.
second round, especially, was just awesome. Alex Pereira, once again, those leg kicks are something fierce, and they were definitely taking a toll on Izzy. Izzy definitely has moments. Actually, I was surprised. I scored round one for Pereira, but the all three judges scored it for Izzy. It
I
turns
saw
out.
that.
So,
Yeah.
not. I thought it was a close enough round. So no robbery there. And
Hmm.
obviously, Izzy turned the lights out in round two, knocked him out cold. And the way he set it up is, I mean, that's everything about it. Dom is all time,
Hmm.
an all-time setup, doing the rope a dope, sort of feigning the injury to let Pereira come in, maybe a little overzealous,
Hmm.
trying to get a finish. The knockout punch, the knockout sequence, all timer.
Yeah.
Definitely going to be on the something we'll talk about the Joeys at the end of the year. I feel like,
Hmm.
and then the celebration was like the cherry on top, does the three arrows, then
Yeah.
snaps the bow over his knee. And then, if that wasn't enough, my man finds Alex Pereira's crying son in the crowd, points at him, and mimics the dead, fallen over
Mm.
thing, just
Mm.
like Pereira's son had done to Izzy after Pereira had knocked him out in kickboxing.
That's cold.
Yeah.
Mm.
So what a just sequence of events, and then he gets on the mic afterwards, Dom,
Oh,
and
what a microphone
has a
moment.
great
Yeah.
speech afterwards. You could really sense what he was talking about. Like, I hope every person can feel just this once in their life, this type
Hmm.
of happiness, and you could feel it. Like, you could just tell he was radiating after that.
Hmm.
This was a very interesting fight week and fight and lead up for Izzy. It felt like he was doing a lot of things against what he normally does. We did not see him much in the time between the last fight and this one, not doing a whole lot of interviews and whatnot. Fight week, you can sense a lot of intensity. Sure, he's still throwing his like lines out there.
Hmm.
Good for a corny line every once in a while. I'm not sure how people feel about the dog collar one, but not my favorite.
Yeah.
But and then once you saw the walkout, he didn't do no dance, he didn't do
Hmm.
no Undertaker. Shout out to Headstrong by Trapped, by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
taking me
Yeah.
back a little bit, but he walked out to that. You could sense just how just intense he was going up against a man who is always intense and with the most accurate walkout song I've ever seen. The most fitting walkout song I've ever seen was Alex Pereira because it was absolutely terrifying, just
Hmm.
like him. But this fight just had a ton of intensity on it when they were actually in the middle of the cage before the fight started. Very intense. And Izzy, I asked you Friday. I said, or maybe I just said this Friday. I can't remember if I asked for your thoughts, but I said I thought Izzy's typical way of fighting, a way that has earned him so many title defenses. It has raised his legacy to bubbling on all time great. I also thought was not a the most advantageous way for him to win this fight. I thought if you fought that way 100 times against Pereira,
Yep.
you might win 35 to 40 times. I said I needed this. He needed to do something different. So Dominic, now that the fights happen, did Israel Adesanya do something different here to pick up this win, or did he ultimately beat him the only way he knows how?
Yeah, it's like Izzy took what he's always done and then just like took it up a notch that we hadn't really seen before. Like, yeah, he's gotten finishes in the past, but it's kind of a slow pacing, methodical, bam, finds the shot. This time, he pretty much brought it to Alex throughout the fight. And yes, the finishing sequence was him, shuttling up on the cage, but still, man, he was just a very aggressive version. He was throwing some of his own leg kicks as well, mixing in good high kicks, the question mark kicks. It was just good work. As Noah said, a very great fight, a very like I don't know if you can find two other people and have a higher level kickboxing fight than what that was last night. I mean,
Right.
it was just a pleasure to watch it. And like I said, man, Izzy just found a way to take what he does best and do it even better. He looked honestly like one of the best versions of him we've ever seen in the octagon. It's crazy that he finds new ways, whether it's really small nuances or things we've never seen before, like the way he got the finish last night. And he just brings them out, I feel like, every fight in some sort of capacity. So it was just a great performance. What a way to get the title back. And Noah, this has been on my mind since last night and all this morning. And it is, you know, it's 1-1. Alex still holds the total record of 3-1 if you count the kickboxing. And so it seems like, yeah, trilogy should come next, right? Really settle the score. But Noah, the way that fight ended last night, it felt like nothing more needed to be done, nothing more needed to be seen. It felt like that type of finish, that type of post-fight celebration, post-fight interview felt like a stamp to end a rivalry, even though traditionally when the numbers are the way they are, I wouldn't come on here and say that the next day. What do you kind of think of the way I just described that?
Well, that was our entire story
Mhm.
setup that we did on Friday was this idea. Israel Adesanya kept talking about my story,
Mhm.
his story, history, that he said that again in his post-fight interview. But talking about how like this is my story, this isn't how it ends. And I raised a question, well, what if it is Pereira's story?
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, Dom, Israel actually kind of acknowledged that in the
Mhm.
post-fight interview. He said, "I'm the antagonist
Yep.
of Pereira's story, but his story, my story, his story,
Right.
history, that whole thing," which was a very nice line there that I could not replicate or duplicate myself because I'm not quite as smooth with it as Israel is. But for what you're saying, I mean, it was kind of the movie ending. It was the
Yeah.
storybook
Yep.
ending, like what the headline says. It for Israel Adesanya to be down 3-0, this guy that was really chasing legacy all along. That's why he takes fights like with Anderson Silva and
Mhm.
why he goes to an absolute war with Kelvin Gastelum before round 5 says, "I'm prepared to die." Because whether or not you believe he really means it, the man is constantly chasing legacy. He strives to be the best fighter in UFC
Yeah.
history. That's what
Yeah.
his goal is. It's not about being the best middleweight, it's about being an all-time great.
Mhm.
But yet, this boogeyman who had followed him, and if you wanna kind of set it up that way, not only was this the guy he couldn't get past in kickboxing, he goes, "Well, I'm gonna go to MMA where I can build a bigger brand, where I can become bigger, make more money, and really leave a legacy in combat sports." He does that, off to a great start, and then this guy who he could not get away from him in kickboxing comes to MMA, gets fast tracked into a title shot,
Mhm.
steamrolls Sean Strickland, and then knocks out Israel Adesanya after being up on the cards going into that 5th round. It shows the mental fortitude too. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes.
and I don't think we doubted that for sure. Like I
Yeah, we
don't
even
I
mentioned it.
yeah, like his mental toughness is one of his best traits, and that showed through here. Um, God, I'll tell you what I to kind of continue your trilogy setup there. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind though that if in middleweight right now, the trilogy is the biggest fight to make.
For sure. Yeah.
And when the fight first ended, I was off. I want this trilogy. That's what I was saying. I was like, this has to be a trilogy
Mhm.
because both fights were awesome. Both fights had highlight reel endings. They were exciting. There's so much story to this rivalry. But
Yeah.
I do get your point that it feels like that was kind of the end of it. So like when
Yeah.
they do a trilogy bout, what is the story for that one? I
Right.
mean, I guess it's
Yeah. It's
who
weird.
takes the series in MMA, but then it's still if Israel won, it'd be 3-2. Like I get what you're saying. It feels kind of like the last thing for this rivalry to do was to have Israel get a win.
Yeah.
And so at first I was still very confident though. I'm like, you gotta run this back. And I was even
Right.
thinking, Dom, interesting that the UFC hadn't committed to Stipe and John Jones for UFC 290 to
Mm.
headline. Perhaps this trilogy bout would be a fight that they'd like to see done on International Fight Week, July 8th. And then pretty much everything after the fight, all the post fight press conferences kind of told me that that's not the direction that we may be heading.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Adesanya was very adamant about how he got his immediate rematch because of everything he's done in this
Right.
sport in this division. He's like, don't get me wrong, Pereira won the first fight in MMA, but he only got that title fight because of me, because
He
of
was
our
yes.
history.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's like, now that he's lost the belt, he's like, I think he needs to go through the same thing I went through to even get this belt in the first place. Like, he needs to go earn his way back. Essentially, kind of shooting down the idea of a trilogy with him,
Mm-hmm.
which not saying that's why he's saying it, but can't blame him. Would not want to fight that guy again. But then you had Dana White at his portion was asked about it, and I figured he would be like, "Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world." No, Dom, he said he thinks Pereira is going to immediately move up to 205 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, not to mention Israel Adesanya also seeming to want to settle some beef with Dricus Du Plessis. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if
I
you
saw
caught
that.
that. Would not reference him by name, but talking about wanting to drag his ass to South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That is a we'll talk about that. That is the interestings of being a really like I'm not even talking about the fight because I would highly favor Izzy in that
Yeah.
one. But in terms of the lead up, the story of that, because Drake is, saying he's the real, guys like him and
Yeah.
what was the other guy that
Cameron Simon, I think's
yeah,
his
they're the
name. Yeah.
real African fighters, and you have that dynamic because you're having two white guys saying this to the three black African
Mm-hmm.
champions. Even though again, African does not mean black or white, but when you're
Right.
in America, you're supposed to say African Americans and whatnot when you're talking about black people. And I think there's just be an interesting lead up when you
Mm-hmm.
have that. Um, it might be a little messy, a little dirty, but that's what the fight game is. And I could see that lead up being very intriguing. However, I want to focus on the Pereira part of this 205 pounds.
Mm.
I'll ask you first, is it more likely for a trilogy to occur next or for Pereira to make an immediate move to 205 pounds? And if you choose the immediate move to 205 pounds, and even if you don't, this could just be a portion about that move at some point. We assume he'll go there. How does his ceiling changed by moving up 20 pounds? Does he become still a true threat to a championship, or by being, closer in size to a lot of those guys at that division, does his ceiling get lowered a bit?
I think his ceiling gets higher, Noah. I remember when he first beat Izzy, and I think it's even a clip that we put out. Kind of like, can he be a long-standing middleweight champion? I think was
Mhm.
like the main question focused on in that conversation. And I believe I said, yeah, I could see him doing a couple of things, but all in all, the matchups at middleweight are just tougher. So if he goes up to 205, I think he's an immediate threat. Not saying he's going to jump right into a title fight. He'll probably have to fight one against one of the top five guys, more than likely, and then get a shot. But you have the storyline there, first and foremost. Avenge Glover Teixeira, his coach, longtime training
Mm.
partner, that's with him in his corner in every single fight, to avenge him and get that title for him and his legacy. And I think that he can defend and match up better with people, the current state of 205, better than he can with some of these middleweights, man. And he's only going to fill out. I mean, look how big he is at middleweight. He's he's going to be bigger than some of the light heavyweights. I have no doubt in my mind. I bet he walks around at 230 pounds when he's not in a training camp. The guy's a specimen. So I think that will be next. I don't think the trilogy will happen. I just, again, everything about last night, the way it ended, just felt like that was it. The rivalry was incredible. It was so competitive, but that's it for now, at least. I think he goes to 205 next, gets a fight in. If he wins, challenges for a title. No telling who that'll be. It kind of is up in the air right now, the title picture and when it's going to get defended at light heavyweight. But yeah, I think all in all, the matchups are better. The way that he fights with some of them is just better for him. I could see him winning that title and defending that title more than what I could have seen him doing at 185 pounds.
Well, that's interesting because you did say you thought he had the makings of
Yeah.
being a long-standing champion at middleweight. That if he could have got past Adesanya the second time, fights with Whitaker or Vittori or whoever else in that 185-pound weight class, you thought he could be in your mind was favored to potentially win those. Um, right now, everything's telling me that Pereira making that move to 205 is what's more likely.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see this being something that all of a sudden the direction changes here in a couple months. Because ultimately, I think what people are going to realize, especially those making the decisions in the UFC, is that there's no other fight for Israel to take at 185 pounds right now.
Mm.
I mean, Israel mentioned Dricus, but he's going to need another fight.
Right. Can you really see him getting a title fight next?
And
Yeah.
depending on who you put him against, let's say you give him like a Vittori. I think that'd be a great fight. But I'm not super confident in Dricus still. I'm still not just like, I'm not all in on him, Dom. I know he keeps finding a way to win,
Yeah.
but he just does it in these ways where he looks so vulnerable, so gassed, so just like done, but he keeps like dogging his way
Yeah.
out of there. And that's great. Those are great traits to have: his durability, his mental toughness, his ability to, when push comes to shove, he just keeps going. But also, I think when he faces the elite of this division, he's gonna
Be tough.
have a rude awakening. Now, I don't know if Marvin Vittori is that guy, but I do think that's an interesting fight. I'm just throwing it out there. But let's say, I mean, so if Dricus were to win, that'd be great. And then you can set that big fight up and perhaps do it somewhere in Africa. I know one of the reporters or on site talking to one of the journalists asked Dana about UFC Africa, and he mentioned how I believe Nigeria is putting in a pretty big arena
Okay.
right now. So I think it was like a 12,000 capacity arena, which I
Okay.
don't know if it'd be enough to host like an Adesanya fight. I think the capacity at this one in Miami, Florida was closer to 20,000.
Yeah.
So, but it's at least a start. And that's been something Dana's said about Africa. This idea you have 3 African born UFC champions, but the infrastructure
Yeah.
in Africa is not equipped for these massive UFC or
Events. Yeah.
boxing events or whatever. Especially when you're talking like pay-per-views, like you have 3
Yeah.
champions. Like, it's one thing to bring like a fight night, you put guys like Sadiq Yusuf on it or whoever, Dricus, whatever it might be, but that's not the direction people want. People want it to go big.
Yeah.
You put
Yeah.
a couple of those champions on the card. Um, Regardless, Dom, it makes me think that in a few months that they may change course and try to get this trilogy booked. And it may feel somewhat strange. It might feel like, oddly enough, even though this is the one to settle the score in a lot of ways, it might feel like the story for this one just was more important to us, felt bigger to us. But I just don't see, if you're Pereira, you have another chance to win the 185-pound gold, and then that would help you even more in your move up to light heavyweight. That would be like, okay, that might get you an immediate title match at 205. And you could try to right that wrong that you just lost to Adesanya. Meanwhile, for Adesanya, if he wants to stay active, I don't see who he fights next. Do you think that the UFC could possibly give a third shot to Robert Whitaker?
There was actually one name I wanted to discuss.
Okay.
And
Oh,
it's
well,
someone that
yeah.
tweeted at Izzy
Okay.
last night and said to see you soon. Is there a world where Khamzat Chimaev comes back to 185 and immediately gets a title fight with Izzy?
I mean, don't get me wrong, Dom. I would be absolutely stoked for it.
Yeah.
I'd be stoked for it.
Yeah.
Is there any reason to give it to him outside of just the intrigue because he's a huge star? No,
Right.
he's not earned it at 185 pounds. But I've told
Yep.
you, Dom, the Colby situation has opened my mind to this fact that
Yep.
I'm done with the. I'm done fighting a good fight for the guys that deserve it. I've turned to the dark side. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
embrace the chaos of this sport, and yeah, I actually dare I say, Dom, the Hamzat Israel Adesanya fight is a fight I want to see more than a third MMA bout between Pereira and Izzy, and that's saying a lot for me
Yeah.
because I thought both these two fights that those two have had have been fucking awesome and have given us all time moments.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Do you
think
do you agree with that? Like, is
no,
that the fight you want to see?
100%. And again, deserving, the word deserving aside, he's the biggest name. He's one of the biggest names in the sport right now. You pair him up with one of the other biggest names in the sport, that's probably because I remember saying whenever we did verbal that one of the biggest fights not made right now would be Colby versus Hamzat. Well, Izzy has the belt back now. Israel Adesanya versus Khamzat Chimaev for the title. Mm, is probably this. I'm so close to saying the biggest, but I don't want to say it completely because of John versus Stipe. But Noah,
Oh,
it rivals John versus Stipe as the biggest fight the UFC can book for the rest of the
yeah,
year.
I'll be very curious to see once Hamzat inevitably is fighting for a title because I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when with
Win.
that
Yeah.
guy. I'll be curious to see how he appeals to the casual audience
Yep.
because I think there's a huge thing for him right now. Like I do
Yep.
believe he has the makings of being just a huge star and someone that you either love because he's kind of this, you know, this foreign gangster kind of, but also a guy that a lot of people love the hate. And
Yeah.
so we got a little bit, we had some pushback on that when we brought up that idea that he's embracing being the villain
Yep. Yep.
from back with all the mess that went down with UFC 279. But Dominic, I think it's pretty clear that this guy's embracing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's just embracing it. I think he is it. Like I
Yeah.
think, don't get me
He's
wrong. You see, I'm sure he's a sweet fellow, but also I think he might just be a psychopath. Like I don't know.
yeah.
That's just he's a terrifying man, and I think the idea of him versus Izzy is gold. I think that Prince
mm,
money.
mm,
Um, yeah, I would rather see it, and that's not easy for me to say because him versus Pereira 3 would be massive
right.
and would just both fights were great. Like, there's no reason for them not to do it because it's one to
Yep.
one.
Yep.
Each have a win over each other, right? And it's been two massive title fights. MSG, then here in Miami, first time in 20 years. Biggest gate outside of what was it? Outside of Vegas and
Like Vegas and
MSG.
MSG. Yeah.
And the fact that 20 years ago they made less than 500,000 as their gate. I mean, you everything tells me that you should just do a trilogy bout, but
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what makes it kind of like frustrating. I shouldn't say frustrating because, but Hamzat's like he was so active out the gate,
I know.
and then all of a sudden it's just been really hard to like
yeah.
even have him in the octagon, and I don't know why that is. He seems to want to fight everybody, kill everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but then we haven't seen him since obviously the whole 279 fiasco, Kevin Holland. And that was really quick work for him.
Yep.
I mean, I'm ready to see him.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm saying that kind of makes me think that we'll be seeing him here pretty soon. But I don't know if it would be against Izzy because I don't know if the timeline would match up. I don't know.
What if they headlined International Fight Week?
I mean, just inject it, Dom. We'd have to go. We'd have to go. We have to go. We have to spend over $1,000 on tickets to go to that.
Man, I'm telling you, I could see it. I mean, all in all, literally, if you're thinking damage wise for Izzy, took some shots, right? But it's 3 months away. Hamzat's gotta be ready. He hasn't fought since September. That's big time stuff for the UFC if they do it.
Yeah. We'll